It's one of the most fun times of the year, free agency season. A surprising move, but also one you understand due to the money situation Baltimore has, was when they let go of CJ Mosley. He's been a really good play for Baltimore for years now, and it seemed like he was going to be there for a long time. But sometimes you can't spend that much cap space on one position, and so the Ravens are going to let him walk this season. One of the things that makes him so good is his awareness. It's so important to have a linebacker who is aware, and CJ Mosley certainly is. Like on a play like this, for example. This one you've probably seen 100 times, but I'll show it to you anyways. As you see, it's a cover 0 blitz, meaning that every single Ravens defensive back has a one-on-one matchup, and then they're just going to send everyone else to rush the passer. These are the routes that the Browns will be running, and the one route, of course, looking on the screen that would make the most sense to throw to against this coverage would be that route right there, as it's a crossing route short and it's past the first down marker, and this would allow the Browns to pick up the first down since there is no one in coverage in that area. It's a tough play for a defensive back to make, as you're also cutting away from the defensive back in charge of guarding that receiver, so this is the perfect route to beat this coverage. And as of right now, it's working out pretty well. That Browns receiver is cutting in, and the Ravens defensive back who has to try to cover him is much farther back, meaning it would be very hard for him to get a pass deflection. However, look at Mosley on this play. It's worth mentioning that Mosley actually got blocked pretty well in a situation like this. However, he's smart enough to realize that because he got blocked, it could end up creating some advantages that weren't necessarily in the initial play. He sees where Mayfield is throwing and jumps up and is able to intercept the ball. The reason you've probably seen this play before was because this was the play that sent the Ravens to the playoffs in week 17 of the regular season. This was a huge moment and probably the biggest moment the Ravens have had in several years, and he was able to come through in a big way. You'd see a lot of guys not be able to have the awareness in typical situations, but especially not be able to in high pressure situations. However, he was able to do that as well on this play, and it really just goes to show how good of a player he is. This play is another good example of how he can impact the defense in a positive way. As you see, it's a cover 4 zone, and that means that typically against the cover 4 zone, you want to throw something shallow, because of course there's only 3 players in the middle of the field and 4 players deep, meaning that you don't want to throw anything deep on a play like this. So that's what Breeze is actually going to do here. He has a check down, and that's where he's going to go to. But take a look at how Mosley sees all this, sprints up, and makes a tackle for not much of a gain at all. This is one of those plays you just expect to be getting positive yards. However, Mosley did a great job of stopping him here. One of the things that makes a linebacker so important is they have to be effective in both the passing game and in the running game, and Mosley certainly is. As you see, this is the blocking concept that the Saints will be running, and it's pretty simple. They have one-on-one blocks all across the board. Kamara is actually going to break to the right side of the screen, as he feels like he has a better window to try to get some yards from that side of the screen, and that's where Mosley is on this play. Look at how he's easily able to get around that block and get to Kamara and stop Kamara for not much of a gain at all. He also had some help come through, but that doesn't matter. I'm talking about how he played in that position, and he played very well there. The reality is, the reason why Mosley is looking to get a big contract is simply because he's a really good player. He can help you in all facets of the game. So let's get into some teams that I think would make sense to go after CJ Mosley this offseason. One team that I think could make a lot of sense would be the Oakland Raiders. This play is a pretty good example of why. As you see, this whole play concept is they're going to have their left tackle move up to block a linebacker, and then they're going to pull 2 offensive linemen over to the top half of the screen, which will then help them as they're going to be running to that top half of the screen. So now this is the situation you want to take a look at. The left tackle is pretty clearly about to block that linebacker just straight up. This now means that that linebacker has a couple of options. He could continue to run to the top half of the screen, which would be a little bit more difficult to get around that left tackle, but he could at least, if he does get around that left tackle, then I'd be in a great position to make a tackle. He also could try to break underneath that left tackle, which would be a lot easier for him to get around that left tackle. However, now he would be in a much more difficult situation to try to make a tackle on the halfback. So he has a decision to make. However, he doesn't make a decision at all. He pretty much just allows himself to get blocked straight up, and he's now in terrible position to try to be making a tackle, and basically gets taken out of the play. He of course wanted to stay in his gap assignment. However, sometimes you can stay in your gap assignment while still getting around blocks, and he failed to do so on this play. Their linebacking play also struggled in the passing game this season, like on this play for example. As you see, it's a cover 3 zone, and take a look at how this play is going to actually end up developing. As you see right now, the Raiders have a linebacker right there, and since there is a receiver running right underneath him, he's going to move forward to cover up that gap where the receiver is. But this is the mistake. In zone coverage, you have to cover up as big of a zone as you possibly can, and now he's actually narrowing his zone, which is going to allow for a receiver to get wide open behind him. Positioning is everything as a linebacker, and even just one step can mean the world. Another team I could certainly see CJ Mosley going to would be the Indianapolis Colts. And really, I'm putting the Colts in almost every single video I make since they have so much cap space and they're also clearly looking to compete this year. But I really do think that CJ Mosley could be a big benefit to them, as they can now have CJ Mosley and Darius Leonard as linebackers. One reason why is this play, for example. They're going to have an edge rusher rush up to the top half of the screen, and then have a linebacker rush down around where he's going to be going, and he should be unblocked and get straight to the quarterback for an easy sack. That's at least the way this play is drawn up, and that's what the Colts are hoping to happen on this play. But as you see, he's actually going to hesitate a little bit. He doesn't do what he's initially designed to do, which is go after the quarterback, and he kind of hesitates for a second, as it could be a running play, and he wants to make sure he's able to stop the run. That's not really that big of a mistake. I'm not really going to blame him too much for that. It wasn't a bad play. However, it also wasn't a great play. And CJ Mosley's the kind of guy who makes great plays. If Mosley was in that situation, he probably reads right away that it's actually going to be a passing play and is able to rush over and get a sack. He at least would do it far more often than your average linebacker would. And so that's why I think CJ Mosley could be a big benefit to this Colts team. Another reason would be a situation like this. The Colts are running a cover 2 zone, and those are the routes that they'll be going up against. You're going to take a look, as there is a route right there that's in the middle of a gap in coverage that could get open, and at the very least, could draw that linebacker to cover up that part of the zone, and then allow another receiver to get open behind him. Both of the other Colts linebackers are covering up 2 Bengals on each side of the zone. However, the middle linebacker is still going to rush over to try to double team a guy, even though he really should just stay where he's at. This now means that the Bengal who's running in that direction will end up getting wide open, and Andy Dalton is able to hit him, and they're able to pick up a big gain. Another team I could easily see going after Mosley is a team that just lost a linebacker in Jamie Collins. They have the cap space to go after him, and it is a position of need, so I could easily see the Cleveland Browns going after CJ Mosley. I do feel like the Browns linebackers did have a bit of a problem with staying in position throughout the season, and this play is a good example. Oakland's going to fake a jet sweep to the left side of the screen, which will actually going to fool a linebacker into running to that left side of the screen. Then they can simply just double team 2 defensive linemen and send their halfback straight up the middle to hopefully pick up some yards. As you see, the Browns linebacker there gets pretty far out of position. Really, you'd want to be about right here if you knew what was going on. However, because he ends up running so far over because of the potential jet sweep, this is not going to make things a lot easier for the Raiders. The reality is, he doesn't have to cover this gap assignment the way he was. He has to trust his defensive end to cover that gap assignment and to force that receiver back if it is a jet sweep, and he also has to trust his defensive backs can go over and make a play. It's not an easy play, however, it is a play that he doesn't end up making. Again, a lot of these aren't terrible plays. I'm just showing how a great linebacker could turn a bad play into a great play just by being a good player. Another good example is a play like this. It's a cover 4 zone, and the Oakland Raiders are going to send a route right there, and it shouldn't be too great of a route as it is right in the middle of that zone. However, it does also kind of turn into one-on-one coverage, where now you have a receiver running that route, and there's a linebacker in that area, so if the receiver can then win his one-on-one matchup, it could still end up being a good thing for Oakland, and that ends up being exactly what happens. It's just a matter of losing your one-on-one matchup, and it's a clear example of why the Cleveland Browns could use another linebacker. This next play is another good example. Those are the routes that the Steelers will be running, and it's worth noting that because there is a route going deep in that middle of the screen, this now means that the linebacker who's covering up that zone right there will probably end up running towards the route that's deeper in his zone. So typically what a very aware linebacker would do here is the guy who's in charge of guarding that zone would simply see that there's now another receiver who's going to be open and run over there to cover up that receiver. This is one of those times where it actually be a smart idea to abandon your assignment. However, that's not going to exactly be what ends up happening here. He's going to stay where he's at, and if you take a look, the Brown on the other side of him also stays where he's initially designed to block, although he actually has to be there due to the other receiver there. But because of this, it's now going to allow a Steeler to get wide open underneath and able to pick up a ton of yards. This is just too easy for Pittsburgh that Cleveland is definitely not going to want to let them keep doing against them. The fourth and final team I think I could totally see signing CJ Mosley would be the Cincinnati Bengals. They do appear to be looking to compete this season, they do have some cap space, and linebacker is a bit of a position of need, like take this play for example. The Steelers are going to send their fullback up to the top half of the screen, which you're going to try to sell as though it's going to be a run to that top half of the screen. However, that's just a fake, it's actually going to be a run to the bottom half of the screen. But take a look at the Cincinnati linebacker here. He bites on this fake 100%. He runs straight forward and completely takes himself out of the play. Granted, he does have to make sure he covers up that gap in the middle of the screen. However, if he was a lot farther back, he could have easily then ran over and still been able to make a play. But because he got fooled, it ended up being a very bad play for the Bengals, as the Steelers were able to pick up a lot of yards. Having a good linebacker is so important, and CJ Mosley is a great one. There's a lot of teams he could end up going to, and a lot of teams that he would certainly help. It'll be interesting to see which one he ends up going to.